Honest Hearts is usually considered to be the worst of Fallout New Vegas' 4 DLCs. It's not bad or anything, but aside from Joshua Graham, it's not really the most interesting DLC, nor is it the hardest. But what if there was a way to change that? Can you beat Fallout New Vegas' Honest Hearts DLC without taking any damage? Every DLC in New Vegas has a level requirement, a level at which the developers suggest you be at before you start a specific DLC. For Honest Hearts, that happens to be level 10. Now, I could dump skill points into speech and guns and steamroll through everything, but I want to go into Honest Hearts with as bland a character as possible, so I somewhat evenly distributed my special points, picked speech, guns, and medicine as my tag skills, chose Wild Wasteland and Trigger Discipline as my traits, and began the leveling process. I used console commands to do this, to give myself the minimum amount of experience required to get to level 10. As I leveled up, I evenly distributed my skill points across all skills, aside from my tag skills. In retrospect, I should have made every skill the same, but with medicine being literally worthless, since I can't take damage in the first place, I figure those wasted skill points balance things out. Regarding weapons and armor, I'm going in with only what I can get from the DLC packs I have installed. No stopping at Chet's store or the gun runners to stock up on supplies. Also, because the point is to beat only Honest Hearts without taking damage, I didn't mess with my health until I got to the start of the DLC. I had a bit of a problem with some death claws and geckos on my way to the Northern Passage, but this video isn't about them. After about 30 minutes of wasted time, I finally arrived at the Northern Passage, where I could speak to Jed Masterson, convince him that I was a big, strong boy, and put what I had to into the special box to get myself down to 100 pounds of supplies. I only had 124 pounds of stuff when I left Doc Mitchell's house, so finding 24 pounds of shit to drop off wasn't all that difficult, especially since the lightweight metal armor from the Mercenary DLC pack weighs 20 pounds by itself. With my supplies set, I dropped my max health down to 1, so that any damage of any kind kills me. Told Jed Masterson that I was ready to hit the old dusty trail, and we made our way for New Canaan, which, if you're wondering, is about 380 miles northeast of Las Vegas. Or, put another way, it's a little over 24 million Cheez-Its away from Las Vegas. In the cold nights on the road, I snuggled close to Jed's beard to keep warm. The way into Zion Canyon was a one-way street, according to Stella. Luckily, I wouldn't have to listen to her run her mouth at Jed for too much longer, as we were ambushed by Whitelegs, who killed everyone besides me. I fired somewhat haphazardly into the tree line, eventually striking and killing one of the Whitelegs with one of my bullets. With the corpses of my fallen companions looted, I could press onward into the canyon. That self-confidence faded after an altercation with 2 more white horses on the west side of the bridge. Then it got trampled into the dirt when even more white horses emerged from their rocky hideout to attack me with their fancy automatic rifles. If you hadn't figured it out by now, the key to not dying when any damage of any kind kills you is to avoid getting hit by a stray bullet. That becomes nearly impossible when someone is capable of firing dozens of times in your direction in mere seconds. Whitelegs with submachine guns are essentially death incarnate. After missing far more shots than I should have with a cowboy repeater, I wasted several throwing spears trying to take out the last standing native, who turned out to be Follows Chalk. Probably a good thing that I didn't kill him. Snap informed me that Joshua Graham would want to see me. He gave me a vague idea of where to go, and we wandered off into the wilderness. I shoved a bullet up the ass of a baby Yelguai at speeds the human mind is not capable of comprehending, got a proper look at where I'd be spending the next few hours, and carefully descended down into the canyon. Fall damage is a very real threat thanks to the verticality this DLC introduces. I got a little ambitious when dealing with a rat scorpion that phased itself into a rock, got fucked by the son of Reptar, found myself a sweet new hat, entered an Eastern Virgin, and eventually made it to the Dead Horsey's camp, where I could finally meet the burned man himself. He rather quickly explained the main quest line of this DLC, escape Zion Canyon. Before I went on the world's greatest scavenger hunt, I bought a .45 auto pistol from Joshi and all the ammo we had for it, alongside a silencer and an HD slide. It's without a doubt my favorite weapon in New Vegas, because I'm a sucker for anything that looks like a 1911. I had a series of components to gather. On the way to a crashed bus, I got assaulted by a bunch of wilderness creatures, geckos, mantises, rat scorpions, and even a puppy minding its own business while looking for its brother and sister that I killed after I killed it. I found the compass in a crashed bus filled with a bunch of cute little skeletons, repaired the compass, and was now off to find walkie-talkies. Scratch that, I'm off to find a medical supply kit and some limited edition lunchboxes. They're quite a bit more than a hop, skip, and a jump away, but my silenced pistol and lack of pants made me the perfect man for the job. Chalkington and I got into a bit of a skirmish with a few white legs, but they were the melee weapon carrying variety, so not much to worry about. Closer to the map marker, I ended a puppy that was learning to swim, checked to make sure my health was still at 1 just to be safe, pulled out my shotgun, and entered Zion Ranger Station. The few bark scorpions inside weren't anything to be concerned about. I found the medical supplies, threw a tin plate, parkoured on some cars, and entered the next cabin to find the collectible lunchboxes. If you've seen a few of my other Can You Beat videos, you probably know that I have problems with the little things. Killing a mythical dragon with a kitchen utensil, child's play. Finding 5 lunchboxes, had to break out the strategy guide for that one. I'm not ashamed to say that I spent 7 minutes in that cabin. With 2 of the 3 fetch quests completed, I could get back to the important things, like tracking down walkie-talkies. They were in the Zion Fishing Lodge, alongside a few geckos and a hunting shotgun. My days of being an errand boy are now behind me. I've graduated to being a delivery boy. Daniel, in the Narrows, needs the supplies I found. It was a bit of a trek out to the Sorrows camp in the Narrows, and even though it'd been quite a while since I last played this DLC, the hatred of this area came flooding back like a flood or something. There were all these bridges and cliffs and passageways. It's more convoluted than it needs to be. Then again, it is a rocky canyon. I gave the supplies to Danny and began making the preparations to evacuate the dead horses from Zion Canyon. Sort of. Time is of the essence, but more important than helping people is spending 25 minutes getting 3 fucking plants so a shaman can make you drink a special tea and force you to go into the heart of the island to kill a ghost bear. And by kill a ghost bear, what I really mean is that I used Fox herself with chalk as bait while I fired at the bear from a safe distance of a few feet away. There were also a bunch of Yaoguai guarding the entrance to the fire ghost bear's lair. We came to an agreement that both parties were happy with so I could pass by. The arrangement being that I kill them and they don't complain about it. My gift from the shaman for successfully completing my trial was a melee weapon, the claw of the ghost bear. So that was a giant waste of time, what a shock. With that bullshit out of the way, I can now actually begin to do my part to help the tribe's people. And then I spent far longer than I should have trying to kill a White Legs Lightbringer with a tomahawk. I eventually nailed him with a tomahawk, which did significantly less damage than I was hoping. And despite my learning experience with throwing weapons, I did the exact same thing with a giant mantis, just with a throwing spear instead of a tomahawk. Wasn't very effective, if you can believe that. I then made my way into a Yaoguai cave, killed the bears inside, laid down a few explosives, and destroyed the entire cave system. The explosion was pretty pathetic, actually. With them dealt with, I could now take care of the real threat, the awkward white guys in shorts. The elephants in the audience may remember what I said about automatic weapons and how devastating they are when used against me. Even when I had the high ground and a grenade launcher, they are still a threat, especially when there's more than one person doing the shooting. As I made my way closer to the first White Legs camp, I found a friendly dog wandering around on its own. Before I discovered it was friendly, I'd missed 2 near point-blank shots. Obviously, I couldn't let it spread rumors about me, so I chucked the tomahawk deep into its spine and watched it roll down the hill into a river. Waking Cloud suffered a similar fate for having watched it. I ensured she could never experience the traumatizing pain of childbirth by destroying her with a tomahawk. When I found the White Legs encampment at Bighorn Bluff, I tried to use my remaining tomahawks to kill them from afar. I tried a few dozen times, and not once did I hit any of them. Once I realized how futile my efforts were, I switched to a grenade launcher and did some serious damage, but didn't actually kill any of them with it. On the plus side, after I descended down the mountain, I finally got a headshot with the tomahawk. The White Legs at the next camp were tougher because they were surprisingly accurate with their shots. Walking to the edge of the cliff was a risky endeavor, but with a final headshot, the White Legs camp was demolished, and my next task was to find a map of the Grand Staircase. Before I did that though, I sent the Cloud back to her camp, because she was making things too easy. Inside the survivalist cave, I proved yet again that the obvious often goes over my head. There was a locked door with a key hidden in a duffel bag. I spent nearly 8 minutes wandering around that godforsaken cave looking for the duffel bag before I finally found it. The holotape I found revealed that the map was back at the Sorrows camp. Back at the camp, I spoke to Daniel again and told him we'd be fighting instead of fleeing. That silly boy thought I meant we'd be fighting as a team. After I put my foot down and made the decision on behalf of everyone in the canyon, I was teleported to the river with Joshua Graham now acting as my companion. We were going to wipe out the White Legs together, but before we did, I went back to the Narrows to see if anyone was left. A few Sorrows were, and after a bit of internal contemplation, I began killing them all. It was all Daniel's fault, really. I only wanted to kill him, but he doesn't spawn out of nowhere unless you make enemies of the Sorrows, which also happens to upset Joshua, causing him to leave. As I finally got to kill Daniel, who was tougher than I expected thanks to his automatic submachine gun. I stripped him naked and left his body to rot in the sun, alongside all his friends that he failed to keep safe, and pushed onward to the Caterpillar's Mound to begin my search for salt upon wounds. That was a lie. I already had Daniel's clothes. I wanted Joshua Graham's bandages. I wanted to see the burned man in all of his glory. I went back to the Dead Horses camp, slaughtered the few tribespeople outside Angel Cave, ambushed those in the cave with a grenade launcher, and waited for the stragglers to exit the cave where I could pick them off with my silenced handgun. With the Dead Horses now having a somewhat relevant name, I could push through the cave until I didn't reach Joshua Graham. He's not there. Again, he's the only one who needed to die, so all this blood is on his hands. Back outside, I killed 2 more Dead Horses and stood there for a while, thinking about what to do next. Once I leave, I can't come back. So I fast traveled to Ranger Substation Osprey so I could see what kind of treasures lied within the Whale Tail Canyon. The Dead Horses and White Legs in the river didn't put up much of a fight. I picked them off from a distance with my hunting rifle. As I got closer to the center of the Whale Tail, I noticed some piranha plants having a long-distance orgy. They did their job though, because a spore carrier sprinted towards me at Mach 10 and caught me off guard. My quick save was when it was a few feet away from me. The Cowboy Repeater is more or less a BB gun on steroids, meaning it's useless. The only firearm that packs enough of a punch to kill the carrier is the hunting shotgun, but it's so quick that I didn't have time to pull it out. Not that it would matter, because not even a critical shot will kill it in one hit. I'd finally met my match, an unwinnable situation. I pussied out, reloaded a prior save, and made a beeline for the southern passage out of Zion Canyon. The path is long and treacherous, as every tribe now hates me. I killed a Painmaker and caught a glimpse of the Big G in the sky, who manifested himself as a fire axe floating in the air. That voodoo shit has no place in Zion, so I chopped up the Painmaker so that if there is an afterlife, he'll be a cripple in hell forever. There were several more White Legs waiting to take me out as I got closer to the passage. An explosion blocked off a path with a bunch of boulders. A small path led to 3 Mary's Cavern that had a few more White Legs in it, most of which weren't too troublesome to deal with. Outside the cavern, enough tribals to form a small army were positioned between me and the end of the line. The ones with automatics sucked, but the rest weren't that bad. There was one man left, a living legend, superstar Joshua Graham. Not only is he a walking tank, he'd make Hawkeye look like a toddler with a Nerf gun. A near-perfect shot with a grenade rifle did practically nothing to him, and even with a handgun, he killed me damn near instantly the second I took a step towards the edge of the cliff I'd found myself on. I spent several lives trying different tactics to kill him. I was lucky in that he'd been damaged in a prior conflict before I found him. It soon became clear that conventional methods of warfare would not be enough to stop the burned man. I put down 5 frag mines and carefully lured Graham up the cliff where I'd been hiding. The earth trembled with every step he took. I should have put more thought into my plan. If he survived being lit on fire and being thrown into the Grand Canyon, a few mines wouldn't be shit. All 5 mines went off and it didn't stop him. My position was now worse than ever. He's sprinting towards me, an angel of death, and I was just sitting there in my underwear hiding behind a rock. The thing is, I'm not as stupid as I've led myself to believe I am. I thought back to the tactics the White Legs used against me, surprise attacks with automatic weapons. I stood up from behind the rock, took aim at Joshua's head, and didn't stop firing until his body lay motionless in the dirt. I stood over him, looking down at what was once thought by many to be a wasteland legend, and saw the life fade from his eyes. The burned man was no more. I followed the river until I saw what remained of Joshua's final act of vengeance. Salt upon wounds and his commanders lay dead on the ground. It was at this point I realized all the death and destruction I'd wrought since I found the map of the Grand Staircase was completely unnecessary. I could have just fast-traveled back to the Southern Passage and left the fate of Zion in the hands of those who'd once called it home. I took one last look at Zion Canyon before I turned my back on it for the last time, returned to the Mojave Wasteland, and beat Fallout New Vegas' Honest Hearts DLC without taking any damage. The overwhelming majority of weapons in Fallout New Vegas are designed to be lethal in one way or another, but there's one weapon that is specifically made to be non-lethal. Can you beat Fallout New Vegas with only boxing gloves? Up first, as always, about half the time, is the character name. I went with Rocky, after the snail that Patrick entered into the Great Snail Race. With boxing gloves being an unarmed weapon, I drained the points from charisma and intelligence, maxed out strength and agility, and put a good amount of points into luck and endurance. The skills I chose were unarmed, obviously, repair, and lockpick. I picked Wild Wasteland for my first trait and thought for a while about whether or not heavy-handed would be worth taking. It gives a plus 20% to unarmed and melee damage, while reducing critical hit damage for those weapons by 60%. I ended up deciding against it. Despite the fact that boxing gloves are designed to favor fatigue damage over damage, we don't have to go far to get our hands in the gloves, as choosing unarmed as a tag skill will result in Doc Mitchell giving us a pair of boxing gloves. They're not in the best condition, but the Ultimate Edition of New Vegas includes the Caravan DLC pack, which gives 4 weapon repair kits, allowing us to take the boxing gloves condition up to about 50%. I looted Doc's house, went outside, took a few practice swings at the dust, sold what I could to Chet, and met Cheyenne and her bitch behind the Prospector Saloon. I knocked the bottles off the fence like the lady wanted, but I guess that wasn't really what she had in mind. I shot them to advance the game and went back inside the saloon to talk to Trudy. At this point, I was anxious to see how useful these boxing gloves actually are. I detest all creatures named Ringo, so the scumfuck hiding at the gas station would be the perfect body bag. I hid from Ringo by hiding in Ringo and started swinging. To say that I was less than impressed would be an understatement. It took more than 50 punches to kill Ringo, which isn't exactly surprising, since the boxing gloves only do 1 damage. But I still wasn't at all happy about it. The small upside is that Ringo's body had been rendered flaccid by my attacks, but his eyes moving let me know that he could feel every punch I landed. He felt his bones shatter, his organs fail, and the life eventually get beaten out of him. Every person I kill will suffer a similar fate, including animals. So it's not actually that bad. I spoke to Trudy again, then went to talk to Joe Cobb about taking over the town. He had a funny feeling about me, which is a strange coincidence since I was just thinking about how funny it would be to beat him to death. The abysmal damage output made its presence known for the second time as I killed Cobb. The one thing the boxing gloves have going for them is the fatigue damage they deal. Every creature has a fatigue level that's determined by their base fatigue value, their endurance level, and the level they are. Once a creature takes enough fatigue damage, they're rendered unconscious, meaning they can't move, defend themselves, or fight back until their fatigue level restores itself, which happens automatically over time. This fatigue thing can give me the upper hand in one-on-one fights. It's still useful when dealing with a group, just less so. Because I did no research on fatigue prior to starting this playthrough, I went to the Hills of Goodsprings to fight a few dogs before I pressed into the heart of the wasteland. The first coyote I beat lost its unconsciousness around the time it lost its life, and the second ran off before I could finish it. The next 3 went the same way. 5 dogs are dead, and I have nothing to show for it. There was a sign near the Goodspring Cemetery that caught my eye. It said something about buried treasure being in the valley just over yonder. The sign was a lie, because there was no treasure. Or maybe the treasure was the pleasure of a dozen giant radscorpions sticking their tails deep inside my anus and letting their poison melt my insides like a child in a hot car. I survived that situation, punched another few dogs, uppercutted the ass of a powder ganger, leveled up, and had a whopping 3 perks to choose from. I chose Confirmed Bachelor because who cares at this point? As I got closer to Prim, I found some trash on the ground and was determined to find the culprit. I'll tell you now that that was a massive failure. The Mojave litterbug is still at large as we speak. but it wasn't a total loss, as I got ambushed by a family of geckos and found out that I can, in fact, knock out animals. I took the long way around Prim, discovered some canyon wreckage and some signs with strange symbols on heaps of garbage, threw a teddy bear farther than anyone ever has before, and did significant damage to a convict on the road to Mojave Outpost. The convicts were weak, but the Jackal gang members, especially their disgusting leader, were tough. And by tough, I mean once I got them on the ground, they took a long time to die. A series of rights and lefts were all it took to end the mantises being held in lockup. Closer to Mojave Outpost, I faced my biggest challenge yet, rad scorpions. Instead of running, I stood my ground, readied my sock and boppers, and was more than willing to go down swinging. I nearly died of boredom from the amount of time it took to kill a single rad scorpion. If I had to kill the rest, I'd have broken out the Drano and let the party begin. I eventually made my way to Mojave Outpost, got some fresh foam stuffed inside my boxing gloves, got a job from Ranger Ghost, then another from Ranger Jackson, and was off to kill more of God's creatures. The giant ants took far more damage from my attacks than I had expected them to, making it trivial to slaughter an entire family of insects. I returned to Ranger Jackson, who rewarded me for a job well done with trash that I can't use. With the NCR being all but dead to me, I put my eyes on the prize and marched towards Mitten to see what the profanity had been going on out there. A lot more ants died on the way out there. And when I say a lot of ants, I mean a lot of ants. I wouldn't have said a lot of ants if I didn't mean a lot of ants. At Mitten Road Pit Stop, I became intimately familiar with something that would annoy me to no end throughout this run: melee attacks. Specifically, people wielding melee weapons and blocking my attacks with them. I wish I could just kill whoever I want with no consequences without having to worry about them fighting back. This would be so much easier if people just killed themselves as soon as they saw me, like people in real life want to do after they see my face. I was inches away from Mitten, ready to see what went wrong, but once again, my overwhelming desire to beat Oliver Swanwick to death got the better of me. I'd like to tell you that I killed him then and there just outside of Mitten, but that would be a lie. I chased him for miles, across the Mojave, through deserts, until I finally caught up to him and got the least satisfying kill of all time. It looked like he tripped on a rock and died rather than being beaten to death. His soul may be free from my wrath, but we can still have some fun with his body before it goes cold. I stripped him naked, nice, and carried him back into the dry desert as an offering to the scorpions. They did not accept. In fact, I think they found it quite offensive. I used their anger to my advantage by luring an army of rad scorpions back to Mitten to wipe out the Legion. That was a lie. I tried to lure one rad scorpion back to Mitten, but it lost interest before I got anywhere near the town. I was determined to rough him up though. I wasn't going to leave Mitten without Wolf Boy's hat. The Legionaries are formidable as fuck in one-on-one scenarios. In a 5-on-1 scenario, where the one would be better off with Hulk hands than boxing gloves, they're just about the worst thing ever. Vulpes in particular was troublesome to kill. I don't know how many times I punched him. I lost count when the numbers started getting big. I'm talking well into double-digit territory here. It didn't help that half the time I couldn't even hit him because one of the Legion recruits would get in my way. After a while, I escaped with my life, returned to Ranger Ghost to let him know about the unspeakable horrors that transpired in Mitten, fast-traveled back to Mitten where the Legion had gotten smart and hightailed it out of there, and was off to Novak. I took a different route to Novak than I normally do, because I had an opportunity to partially fulfill a childhood dream of becoming a train. I followed the train tracks for a good while until I found Prim Pass. I knew a blind Deathclaw lurked nearby, and I was anxious to face my toughest foe yet. I feel confident in saying that I was seconds away from certain victory when the game froze and then crashed. I got fucked up real bad in round 2. The Deathclaw hit me so hard my gloves fell off, which is why today's Mitten Squad boxing pro tip is to dunk your hands in glue before you put on your gloves to ensure a snug fit. I wasn't going to let there be a round 3, because as far as I'm concerned, it's a draw. The Deathclaw scared me shitless when it appeared outside a cabin I'd broken into. I killed a group of Viper gunslingers and finally arrived at Novak. I tried to learn a new move from Captain Cripple, but he wasn't interested in sharing. Got a job from Boone and tried to get Jeannie to follow me out to the dinosaur. But for some reason, even after reading the bill of sale, I didn't have the option to ask her to follow me. So I did the next best thing, and got NCR's least favorite cripple to follow me outside to die. Boone was less than thrilled with my idea, so I gave him the honorable death he'd always wanted. Being knocked unconscious, then beaten to death in a dinosaur's mouth by an idiot wearing boxing gloves. My next stop was the Strip. Legion assassins tried to assassinate me, which led to me resurrecting my Riot Scorpion plan from earlier by luring the Legion to Helios 1, where they could fight the NCR. Unfortunately, Lieutenant Haggerty lost her life during this little scuffle. The good news is that Lieutenant Haggerty is, in many ways, like Edgar. Lieutenant Haggerty can be anyone. Whoever wears the armor and calls themselves Lieutenant Haggerty is Lieutenant Haggerty. More Vipers died, some fire ants died, some weird shit happened in the back of a truck, and I went inside Vault 11 for the first time maybe ever. The mantises inside did far more damage to me than I think they would. I knocked out a mouse, taunted a few more mantises with a possible dinner, and left the vault to find 188 Trading Post. The strip can wait. I recruited Veronica and headed for Hidden Bunker to take care of the Brotherhood ahead of schedule. I passed by Snuffles because I'd probably end up choking him with his foot if I tried to help him. Inside the bunker, once again the small things proved to be troublesome as Veronica just stood in the doorway and did nothing. After I pushed her inside, she got us inside the bunker. I spoke to Power Armor Guy, bought some stim packs, and met the Overseer, Elder, same thing. I tried to kill McNamara, predictably failed, then reloaded a save and took a gander inside his pockets. Turns out he has a key card, and I snagged it. How he didn't feel my boxing gloves in his pockets is a mystery we're not meant to be able to comprehend. I figured that if I already got the key card from one guy, there was no reason to not get the other two and fuck the entire bunker into hell. Veronica didn't appreciate my efforts to exterminate everything and everyone she'd ever loved, so I left her down there too and blew up the bunker. I then returned to the train tracks, but only temporarily because I had a bolder city to find. Lieutenant Monroe was similar to Lieutenant Haggerty in that they were both lieutenants. I bopped him one, then stood there taking dozens of shots from him. Watching him fire shot after shot into my chest to no avail was the most adorable thing I'd seen in a long time. I gave him a right and then a left, and he went down. I don't know if it was my fist that knocked him out, or him smacking the side of his head on a table. Either way, I took advantage of an unconscious military officer and beat him to death. I made it look like an accident by making him sit in the chair completely normally. The troopers inside were unhappy. I thought with the Great Khans being renowned for their toughness, they'd do well against the NCR. They did not. I tried to talk to Jessup, who was distracted by an NCR soldier who interrupted us rather rudely. I aided them outside by knocking out a few of the troopers, then beating them to death. Jessup gave me Benny's lighter. I got my first somewhat useful perk, and this time, for realsies, I was going to the strip. I got distracted by a hole in the ground, ventured inside a sewer, knocked out a few feral ghouls, then a rat, emerged through some sort of a pipe, and arrived at the gun runners. The sexy robot inside didn't have any stim packs, so I bought some from Mick and or Ralph, spent longer than I should have fighting some thugs, scared off some little shit, replaced him with a beautiful trash can, and realized that I don't have enough caps to enter the strip. I sold an assortment of stuff and got inside the strip. My first stop was Gomorrah, where I was stripped of my weapon. I'm not lying when I say that I legitimately thought for about 3 minutes about how I'd proceed in dealing with the casinos without my boxing glove. Then I remembered that I could just go in arms blazing. So I left and went to meet Mr. House, who gave me a little insider info on Swank. Then I tried and failed to use that info against Swank. My only remaining option was to convince Benny that I'd meet him in his suite because I'd hoped to do things to his fanny, thanks to the confirmed bachelor perk. That didn't work, of course. So I had to politely leave, then immediately return and start beating bitches. The chairmen weren't especially tough. Most went down in fewer than 8 punches. A few gamblers ironically fled from me by following me into Benny's suite, where they died. I leveled up after I killed a gambler and took arguably one of the most important perks I could get, Stonewall, which prevents me from being knocked down by melee attacks. This will come into play later on. I talked with Benny for a bit, he sent a few goons after me. I thought for the briefest of moments that things could maybe go my way, and I'd be able to VATS all 4 of them and kill them each with a single punch. Didn't work. This old bird had some fight in her. Before I left the tops, I spent a little while going through all the rooms I could find and killing anyone who wouldn't fight back. I killed people who did fight back too. I just prefer those who didn't make me put any effort into it. Back outside the casino, I fast traveled back to 188 Trading Post to begin the long march towards Cottonwood Cove. Not a whole heck of a heap happened on the way out there. The only thing of note was that I killed 2 golden geckos. Someone smarter than me would be able to pull some sort of a golden glove comment out of that. At the fort, I told the Roman losers that nobody comes between me and my gloves. They tried to kill me. I pretty much ignored them all on my way into Caesar Salad's tent, only to discover, or remember, the phrasing's a bit of a gray area, that Caesar has the platinum chip, not Benny. Then I remembered that I'd be able to get my weapons back after Caesar gives me the platinum chip to destroy whatever's in the bunker below him. I didn't do that. I'm a loyal courier. I installed the upgrade for Mr. House, lied to Caesar about it, set Benny free, left him to die on his own terms, or mine, again, gray area, returned to Cottonwood Cove, got a face full of Malcolm Holmes, and retreated into the river, which allowed me to fast travel back to the Lucky 38 and receive my payment from Mr. House. Oh, you're probably wondering about the robots in the bunker. They can be damaged, but they can't be knocked out because fatigue damage doesn't affect them in any way. Mr. House took me down to his basement. Well, he was about to, when I decided that I didn't want to watch his demonstration for the 8,000th time. So I went down to Mr. House's real basement, where he spends most of his time these days. It took a few swings, but he eventually died. I stuffed a fork in his chest cavity and left the Lucky 38 to go get Yes Man's nonsense started. He took me down to the basement. I left the room to do something, probably food related, and when I came back, I'd been swept off my feet and was back in the penthouse with a giant smiling face staring into my soul. I then had the usual assortment of tasks to complete. Meet the Boomers, Great Khans, Omertas, White Gloves, and Brotherhood. The Brotherhood has long since been destroyed, and the Omertas want nothing to do with me. I went to the Ultralux first, to kill as many of them as was necessary to ensure that I'd never have to deal with them again. Next were the Great Khans. I took the road from Good Springs, rather than going north of the Strip and following the road south. Along the way, I fought a family of Cazadors, managed to knock one out and pummel it to death, then escaped the rest of the hive by seeking shelter in Bonnie Springs. Almost. The game crashed before I reached the town. Upon loading my most recent save, I spent longer than I should have, killing the big corners and mantises across the way from the entrance to Red Rock Canyon. I could have just ignored the Great Khans, but instead, I chose to do something different. Not only did I not kill them all, I went to work for them. My first task was simple enough: find Anders and report back to the Great Khans about his well-being. They thanked me for freeing him. I delivered a mildly suspicious package to Don Hostetler. There was another crash. I delivered the package again, and was sent to Vault 3 to deliver some happy drugs. I think I fucked up somewhere between arriving at the vault and beating Motor Runner to death. Before I left Red Rock, I'd been given some Great Khan's armor. I'm now thinking that I was supposed to wear that armor to get inside the vault peacefully. I think that because I didn't wear the armor and ended up killing most of the fiends inside the vault. And some were tough, especially those who used melee weapons, which were, like, a lot of them. When I approached Motor Runner, neither him nor his dogs seemed happy to see me. He died. I failed the quest, went back to the Crimson Caravan to kill Alice McLafferty, killed a few Brahmin, and arrived at Nellis to meet the Boomers. I opted for the simple solution to the Boomers' problem, where I just kill Pearl and then run as far away as I possibly can. And good news, I found more train tracks. I returned to the Ultralux because, believe it or not, I hadn't killed Mortimer yet, then returned to Yes Man to get the show on the road, installed the thing at the place, and was off to Hoover Dam. The push inside was less of a push and more of a slip and slide, because I ignored those shooting at me on my way inside the offices, bonked the absolute hell out of 2 NCR soldiers, installed Yes Man, flipped a switch, and eventually arrived at the Legates camp. I'll go ahead and tell you now that I went into this rather unprepared. I actually didn't prepare at all. The Praetorian Guards are tough, deal a lot of damage with their ballistic fists, and without the speech check to fight the Legate 1v1, quick scopes only, there are a lot of guards to contend with as well. I fucked up again, big time. It quickly became abundantly clear that I had no hope of beating the Legate. X-Men would become an Emmy Award-winning film franchise before I ever killed the Legate. So I succumbed to my baser instincts and went back to square one. If I ever hoped to have a chance of beating Linus, I'd need a stupid amount of stim packs. So I took my near 12,000 caps to the New Vegas Medical Clinic and bought all the stim packs they had. Then I waited for a few days and bought more, then more, then more. By the time I left, I had 58 plus 19 total stim packs, but I still wasn't ready. I wanted to level up before I faced the Legate again. Mick and Ralph were first, then an assortment of Freeside residents. Then I arrived at the old Mormon fort. Let me tell you, the people in there put up one hell of a fight. If it's any consolation prize, they didn't suffer for very long. From the time I landed my first punch to when all the bodies lie naked on the ground, less than 5 minutes had passed. I was almost ready. There was just one more thing I needed. Well, 2 things actually. Like many weapons in New Vegas, the boxing gloves have a unique variant that are better in every way. The golden gloves are located in the Lucky 38's casino. I snagged them, saw how shiny they were, returned to Yes Man, went back to Hoover Dam, fought my way inside the offices, flipped Yes Man's happy switch, pushed through the Centurions on the way to the Legate's camp, killed a good amount of Legion soldiers with the normal boxing gloves, then finally donned the golden gloves, pumped myself full of drugs, and took the fight to the Legate. Even with the golden gloves, an asshole full of drugs, strength at 10, unarmed at 100, and the piercing strike perk that makes unarmed weapons ignore 15 points of an enemy's damage threshold, this was by no means easy. The golden gloves do help a lot though. The improvements they provide over the standard boxing gloves are not just cosmetic. They're twice as likely to land a critical hit and do 40% more fatigue damage, which means knocking out Praetorians is much easier and they die much quicker. Still, there's a lot of them to deal with, in addition to the Legate, whose fatigue level is among the highest of any creature in the game. I decided to focus on the guards before I dealt with the Legate, since they'd have to be killed anyway. After several minutes of glorious beatings, it came down to Rocky and the Monster of the East. He put up a hell of a fight against me, but he was knocked out just like everyone else, and even with him lying unconscious in the dirt, it still took nearly 90 seconds of non-stop punching to kill him. I got a few glamour shots, used almost every drug I had left, because nothing says victory like overdosing after a war, confronted General Oliver, beat him to death, and beat Fallout New Vegas with only boxing gloves. Fallout New Vegas' 4 DLCs all sort of do their own thing. Dead Money is more about survival than anything else, and Honest Hearts plays it safe. Lonesome Road ends the story of Courier 6, but Old World Blues is the weird one, so why not ask a weird question? Can you beat Fallout New Vegas' Old World Blues DLC without taking any damage? The setup for this challenge is the same as the setup for my previous New Vegas DLC no damage playthroughs. I'm going into Old World Blues with a character that's as generic as possible. Not even a jack of all trades, I'm like a Bill or George of all trades. Special points are distributed somewhat evenly. I picked Speech, Guns, and Lockpick as my tag skills, chose Skilled, which gives +5 to all skills, at the cost of 10% reduction in experience earned, and Trigger Discipline, which makes weapons 20% more accurate, but reduces their fire rate by 20% as my traits. Next came leveling, because New Vegas suggests that you be at level 15 or higher when you start Old World Blues. I used console commands to level myself up to level 15. As I leveled up, I evenly distributed my skill points across all skills until all skills were at 40, thanks to both the Skilled trait and the Educated perk. Then I dumped the last 5 points into Speech. The only worthwhile perks I chose along the way were Educated, Rapid Reload, and Comprehension. The other perks relate to stim packs and other healing methods or companions, so they don't come into play in any way. Regarding equipment, I'm only using what I get at the start of the game: a 9mm pistol, binoclears, a broad machete, a mercenary's grenade rifle, a sturdy caravan shotgun, 10 throwing spears, and a weathered 10mm pistol. Armor is irrelevant, since I won't be wearing armor for most of the run, and healing items aren't worth their weight in shit. I encountered nothing on my way to the Mojave Drive-In, forgot my popcorn but started the movie anyway, got abducted, and woke up at Big Empty without any pants. It was here that I used console commands to set my max health to 1, so that any damage of any kind kills me and automatically reloads my most recent save, forcing me to get through any given scenario without taking any damage. 400 words in, and now the run finally begins. Before I did anything else, I ransacked the sink to find anything useful, which wasn't all that much to be honest. Then I entered the think tank and started what could very well be the longest single instance of dialogue in all of New Vegas. I sped through some of it because I already had a general idea of what Dr. Klein and his fellow think tanks were talking about, but it was still almost 13 minutes. Here's a quick version for anyone watching this for the story. I fulfilled my prophecy of naming myself Lobotomite by getting a lobotomy and becoming a lobotomite. The glorified Pez dispensers lost my brain during the lobotomy. I can't leave until I get it back. There's some sort of a civil war going on, and I need to pick up a few pieces of equipment. I went outside for the first time since the last time, saw a lobotomite, and got into combat for the first time. As soon as I took aim with VATS, I knew this entire thing was gonna suck. Normal headshots with a 10mm pistol did jack shit. According to the Fallout wiki, lobotomites start out at level 25, which would explain why this one in particular would have been difficult to kill if it weren't for the critical shot. I picked up one of my favorite melee weapons in all of New Vegas, a proton axe, off his corpse. Unfortunately, if an enemy is within melee range, I'm pretty much fucked, so I'm not going to get much of a chance to use it anytime soon. It's not all bad though. I've got a waypoint and I know what direction to go. Bronze linings and the whatnot. Before I made any observable progress, I angered 2 more lobotomites, one of which had a firearm, a shotgun to be more specific. If you happen to know what a shotgun is, you probably have a solid understanding of why a lobotomite with one is not a situation you'd want to find yourself in. All it takes is one pellet hitting me, and it's hello loading screen. I lured them behind a box and blew both their heads off with my own shotgun, stumbled across a Night Stalker because Big Empty is a fucking nightmare of a place, then found a Cyberdog that was not at all friendly, and entered X8 Central Facility to find my first object. It was inside X8 that I found my new best friend, the Sonic Emitter. It took out a Mr. Orderly Mark III in just 2 shots. I did some mad science shit and created the perfect amalgamation of man and machine that sadly only lived about as long as my first kid, and pressed onward deeper into the facility. The time had come to prove my worth to America by dispelling of communist children from the fake school. The institutional data retrieval test is now underway. Basically, I just need to get 3 student records from 3 different locations and determine which one needs to be put to death. A few obstacles are in my way. The first are hull monitors. They might as well be the Eye of Sauron because they kill me damn near as soon as they see me. The Cyberdogs are much more worrisome though. They're as fast as they are not dogs. The Sonic Emitter is the best weapon at my disposal in dealing with robots, but even it takes several shots to kill one dog. I eventually did find a concept that worked. Shoot a dog, close door, doggy run away, open door, shoot again. Who knew that all it took to hold back the armies of hell was a cheap wooden door? There were also a few lobotomites roaming the halls, but ones with melee weapons aren't much to be concerned about. A caravan shotgun can handle them quickly enough. As I made my way through the school, I leveled up, dumped the points into speech and guns, picked Here and Now as my perk to level up again, and dumped more points into those 2 skills. I eventually found all 3 records, fought a few Protectrons, and left the facility in search of the X2 transmitter antenna array. There were 2 Cyberdogs waiting outside, one of which managed to follow me onto a roof of a collapsed building. Then, to the right of the building were 2 Night Stalkers. I evaded them by seeking shelter on a walkway while they got stuck behind a pipe. I moved to the right side of the X8 building, hoping to avoid the creatures by going that way, but there were 3 lobotomites over there. 2 of them had melee weapons, but one had a firearm. Then, one of the Cyberdogs found me when I got off the truck I'd been hiding on. At this point, I wanted this DLC to get fucked to death by a giant sandpaper dildo. I eventually got behind the building and ran off behind the pylons to get safely teleported back to the think tank. I actually had no idea what would happen. I figured having seizures and blood squirting from my ears couldn't be any worse than being eaten alive by robotic carnivore bitches. After I caught my breath in the sink, I began making my way to the X2 antenna thing. I spent several lives trying to kill a lobotomite over yonder, pressed onward, made it to the cuckoo's nest, and got myself good and fucked. I quick-saved at just about the worst possible time. The next 20 minutes or so were just awful. The first problem came from a lobotomite with a handgun and surprising accuracy. I probably died a dozen times while trying to run away or kill him. After I killed him, I went back up to the cuckoo's nest, but I'd drawn the attention of more lobotomites who wanted to skin me and turn me into a ceremonial hammock. I tried to take refuge inside a cave, but test subject 1 made sure that didn't happen. Back outside, I managed to kill 2 lobotomites after dying several times. If you thought things couldn't get any worse, you haven't been paying attention. 4 more lobotomites descended upon me. 2 from the left, 2 from the right. I still thank God to this day, even though today's June 21st and this happened on June 20th, that I had a grenade launcher. I used it and a 10mm pistol to kill the lot of them. Then, once again, things got even worse. 3 Y-17 trauma override harnesses started shooting from just beyond those pipes over there. They're tougher than lobotomites and have much more advanced weaponry. I did significant damage to one of them with a grenade launcher. Then another lobotomite showed up on the right, and I retreated behind a rock. I killed both creatures sauntering towards me, tried to loot the corpses, but the other 2 Y-17s had figured out how to get near me. I grenade launched the absolute shit out of them both. Tried again to loot all the corpses I'd created, decided it wasn't worth it, ran down the hill, arrived at the X2 facility, saw even more Y-17s near it, and finally entered a building where I was relatively safe. The few robots inside could be dealt with easily enough with the sonic emitter. I got up to the satellite, uploaded the schematics, and watched as Dr. Mobius sent a small army of robo-scorpions to end me. I took out the 2 Y-17s with launched grenades, retreated inside the building, and had several robo-scorpions to contend with. Just like the lobotomites, there are two kinds of robo-scorpions, generally speaking. There are those that can fire energy projectiles, and those that can't. The ones that fire energy are a real bother. The others can be avoided by running away most of the time. I exited the building, did aforementioned running away, went back to the sink to sell some stuff to the SCIU, had to repair a few things, and spent a while talking to all of the think tanks in the think tank. There are several quests that can be started and completed without ever leaving the think tank. I'd tell you what they were, but I wasn't really paying all that much attention. I was more concerned with clicking through every speech option I had to pass as many skill checks as possible and complete the quests that I could. I completed a few of them and left to discover Higgs Village, the former home of Gabe, the former dog. I once again got into an annoying fight with a lobotomite, this time with me using a plasma rifle that obscures most of my vision. I arrived in Higgs Village and took my sweet time going through all of the houses to find what I could. The only things worth mentioning were the few sonic emitter upgrades I found, Gabe's bowl, the sink personalities, and the teddy bear house. After about 20 minutes of peaceful ransacking, I confronted the super ego. It was the toughest thing I've fought thus far, which isn't surprising given its name, and the fact that it's a fucking level 50 robo-brain. This is probably the closest I'll ever get to beating Will Wheaton to death. With the super ego dead, I went back to the sink and spent several wonderful minutes listening to the bookshoot talk about eradicating sedition.
Wait a moment. Pencil processors offline? Pencil processors offline? Apologies, citizen. It seems traitors have absconded with that module.
I upgraded my sonic emitter and was off to the X12 research facility. I got inside, found out it was a waste of my time, and decided to go to the much bigger and much more research facility X13 Research Facility Center. What? I think I just had a stroke. Inside X13, I recovered all the pieces necessary to create the Stealth Suit Mark II. With the suit wrapped around my fragile body, I could begin the stealth test, which involved sneaking around until I recovered a special document. The test is failed if you're spotted. There are several robotic entities roaming around the halls of the testing grounds, most of which can be taken out with one shot from my sonic emitter thanks to sneak attacks. I found the X13 document, leveled up, upped my speech skill to 75 and gun skill to 70, and listened to Dr. Mobius ramble on about his robo-scorpions again. He sent quite a few of them inside the building after me once he realized I'd stolen the stealth suit. It was here I realized that robo-scorpions explode when they die, which can cause me to die if I don't back away enough. Fighting my way out of the testing facility wasn't all that bad. The smaller scorpions are usually the ones that are restricted to melee attacks, which makes killing them from a distance not the hardest thing in the world. The bigger ones are tougher, faster, and have the capacity to kill me from afar. Luckily, they're like the fake dogs from earlier in that they can't open doors either. I hid behind a terminal to kill another robo-scorpion, eventually escaped the X13 facility, was greeted outside by several more robo-scorpions, retreated behind the building while somehow managing to not get shot, ran by the pylons again, and went back to the X8 Research Center to begin the residential Cyberdog Guard test. It turned out to be less of a test and more of an Old Yeller situation that resulted in me putting old Gabe down for good. He was surprisingly not difficult to kill, though he certainly looked surprised after he died. Mobius sent more robo-scorpions. I spent a considerable amount of time killing them all, then took more attempts than I'd care to admit, killing the few more scorpions inside the facility proper, leveled up to level 20, parkoured on some pipes, and returned to the think tank to tell Dr. Klein that I'd found all the required components. The preparations have been successfully prepared, and I could finally travel to the Forbidden Zone to confront Dr. Mobius. Getting inside the Forbidden Zone, though, that was tricky. There were several robo-scorpions in the area that needed to be handled before I could get inside. The shit part is that they're all the big shooty variety. It took me over 10 minutes to eventually get past them. Part of that time was spent dealing with an additional 2 robo-scorpions that were closer to the entrance of the little canyon area. What I eventually did was come down off my mountain and hide behind an overturned train car and pop out from behind it to take a shot or two at the robo-scorpions. Earlier, I'd absconded from one of the facilities with 2 pulse grenades that were far less effective than I'd hoped. But in time, I made it beyond the scorpions and entered the giant door. It was here that Mobius revealed his secret weapon, the X-42 giant robo-scorpion. This is supposed to be the final boss of Old World Blues. And guess what? The theory that the harder the game is, the easier the final boss will be applies to this DLC as well as it does anything else. The X-42 is tough in the sense that it takes a long time to kill, what with its 1500 hit points, which is more than double that of the Super Ego. I died but one time to the giant scorpion, because I'd found a spot that allowed me to attack it without it being able to attack me back. As its health dwindled, it got closer and was more of a threat, but I still killed it all the same. When it finally died, I looked around the arena for anything useful, didn't find much aside from some ammo, entered Mobius's lair, spoke to him and felt an odd connection to him, probably because of how he sometimes uses the wrong words, like how he says raisins instead of reasons. He agreed to let me take my brain back if I wanted it. I spent several minutes talking to myself about whether I should go with me back to the think tank. It took some convincing, but I got me to go with me after promising myself that I'd take better care of me, and with me and myself reunited, I killed Mobius, and with the pacification field no longer having any effect on me, I went back to the think tank to deal with the think tanks. I thought for a moment about whether I should confront them or just kill them immediately. The way I see it, if things go sideways, it'll be difficult to escape with all 5 robots trying to kill me. So I pulled out my trusty sonic tarantula and opened fire. It shouldn't have surprised me that they were all weak as shit. All but Dr. Klein went down in one shot. I died once in the process, after which I backed myself down the stairs, pulled out a laser gun I'd ripped out of Gabe's dead asshole, and shot from a distance. They had the same ranged attacks as cyberdogs, which have a limited range. From where I was, their attacks couldn't reach me. I killed all 5 think tanks, went through their quarters in search of anything useful, even though it wouldn't matter if I did find anything useful, left the think tank, and beat Fallout New Vegas' Old World Blues DLC without taking any damage. Lonesome Road is considered by many to be New Vegas' most challenging DLC. The enemies encountered have survived in one of the most treacherous areas in any Fallout game and wield high-powered weaponry. But the question isn't how hard it is. The question is, can you beat Fallout New Vegas' Lonesome Road DLC without taking any damage? Just like with the previous 3 DLCs, I'm going into Lonesome Road with a character that's as generic as possible. My tag skills are irrelevant. I chose Skilled and Trigger Discipline as my traits. Skilled gives a +5 to all skills at the cost of a 10% reduction in experience earned, and Trigger Discipline increases accuracy by 20% while lowering fire rate by 20%. The game recommends that you go into Lonesome Road with a character that's at least level 25, and that's what I did. I used console commands to level myself up to level 25, and as I leveled up, I evenly distributed my skill points across all skills. By the time I got to level 25, most of my skills were at 52, with the rest being at 51. Regarding perks, I chose Animal Friend, which turned out to be a complete waste. Bloody Mess for a 5% damage boost, Confirmed Bachelor for a 10% damage boost to male enemies, Educated to give me 2 extra skill points every time I level up, I took this pretty early on, Entomologist to do 50% more damage when attacking mutated insects, Finesse to land more critical hits, Lady Killer to do 10% more damage to females, Rapid Reload to reload 25% faster, Scrounger to find more ammo in containers, Strong Back to carry 50 more pounds of equipment, Swift Learner to gain 10% more experience whenever experience is earned, and Weapon Handling to reduce strength requirements for all weapons by 2. I'm going into Lonesome Road with only the equipment I have access to at the start of the game, which is all from the various DLC packs available for Fallout New Vegas. With the exception of the grenade rifle, none of it is all that promising. Armor is irrelevant, as are healing items. Just before leaving Doc Mitchell's house, I used console commands to set my max health to 1 so that any damage of any kind kills me, and reloads my most recent save, forcing me to get through any situation without taking damage. I then left Doc Mitchell's house, made the reunion my active quest to have a waypoint, and made my way to the canyon wreckage. I stood there for a moment, thinking about what kind of nightmarish shitstorm I was about to walk into. I passed through the wreckage and took my first look at the divide. I found the Hopeville silo bunker entrance, tried to open the blast doors, failed, looted a few ammo crates, found an arc welder, and activated Eddie, who has an assortment of memories inside of him which sometimes inhibit his ability to be useful. I used him to activate an automated commissary that unfortunately didn't have any useful weapons, but it did have a fuck ton of ammo available, so I sold my armor and healing items to buy some ammo, that I thought I might find useful sometime down the road, as well as whatever I could use now. After Eddie activated the blast doors, I restored the power. I saw a few of Eddie's brothers, wandered around the missile for a bit, and got into combat for the first time. You know you're in for a bad time when the first enemy you find is a sentry bot. I used quite a few rifle grenades on it, then let Eddie do most of the work for me. A few marked men and a dead sentry bot were just up ahead. Something pinned a marked man to a wall by pushing a steel rod through both the marked man and the steel wall it was pinned to. Another bad sign. I managed to take out another sentry bot all by myself. I passed through some sort of an office and opened the silo bunker's doors. That was a mistake, because 4 or 5 sentry bots came online and dispatched of EDE in seconds. I may or may not have had a hand in that by blasting him with a grenade or two. Either way, Eddie is down for the count, and I found myself trapped in a corner with multiple sentry bots between me and the rest of the divide. I can guarantee that if it weren't for the grenade rifle, there's no way I would have been able to get past them. I was able to pop out from behind cover, shoot a grenade, and retreat before any of them could hit me. There were still 2 turrets left, and I had already gone through almost half of my grenades. But the sentry bots had been returned to their endless slumber. I used the same tactic in my companion-only video by backtracking through the silo and exiting through the entrance to revive Eddie. The turrets were less of a threat than I thought they'd be. I looted all the mechanical corpses, went outside to Hopeville, and had a conversation with Ulysses for the first time. He provided me with some backstory about myself, spoke dramatically about things that have transpired and events that still have yet to take place, and explained that the divide may prove to be the end of the line for me. The small upside about Lonesome Road is that it's fairly linear. Your objective is pretty much to just pass through the divide by whatever means necessary until you reach Ulysses. The second part of that linear path takes us through Hopeville, where there are quite a few marked men. They have high-powered weaponry and are pretty accurate. Not that the weapons they carry actually matter at all. It doesn't matter if it's an anti-material rifle or a Nerf gun, the bullets kill me instantly. The first few marked men I took on were tough. Eddie provided a distraction, but I had no long-ranged weapons at my disposal, making attacking from the distance a bit of a problem. I died numerous times on this marked man hunter alone because I was determined to kill him with a throwing spear. Persistence paid off. He died. Another marked man took multiple point-blank shotgun shells, but my ignorance paid off when I looted the hunter and got my hands on a trail carbine, which I just so happened to have bought some ammo for back at the commissary. The trail carbine allowed me to do significant damage from a distance, thanks to the finesse perk and sneak attack bonuses. Before finding the laser designator, I explored a bit to try and get my hands on more weapons. Believe it or not, using a grenade rifle indoors is not the best idea when you can take no damage. Luckily, the marked men who emerged from the barracks were mostly carrying melee weapons, allowing me to take them out with relative ease. There was another commissary inside where I sold the armor I picked up, useless healing items, and a few weapons to let me stock up on more ammo. I then arrived at a small town where I ran into another small issue. Someone, somewhere, was watching me, and even when I was hidden, they emerged from nowhere to blast me into oblivion. Even after I sent grenades into every nook and cranny I could think of, this mysterious foe remained at large. I eventually figured out that I could sneak behind a building to get him to reveal himself, allowing me to turn off his body with a bullet and pick up Red Glare, a rocket launcher. After acquiring the laser designator and detonating a nuclear warhead, an assortment of marked men arrived and were looking for a fight. Red Glare doesn't do as much damage as a missile launcher or a Fat Man, but you can fire rockets absurdly quickly, which is great for dealing with groups of enemies. I almost got stuck when I quick-saved as a marked man was about to swing his sword and I was reloading. Took a few tries to get away from him and explode him with my nail gun. With the area clear, I pressed onwards, taking on a few marked men here and there, most of which could be taken out with a sneak headshot with the trail carbine. Found a holotape Ulysses left behind, blew up another nuke, and a bunch more marked men emerged from behind it. The ever-present problem with marked men is how accurate they are, even with a rocket launcher. I landed a few lucky grenade rifle shots and did big damage to the group, and spent longer than I should have dealing with one man who remained. I killed him, looted all the bodies, and went feet first into hell by entering the collapsed overpass tunnel, also known as the headquarters of the Tunnelers, who are some of the most feared creatures in the Divide. Inside, I got more Eddie backstory and began to carefully and quietly make my way through the tunnels. A few feet inside, I found a dead NCR trooper and picked up a few flashlight bombs from his pockets. Then I saw it. the first tunneler. He went down in one shot, but I had a feeling a few more weren't far behind him, so I took shelter in an overturned vehicle, and soon enough, there were more. Eddie tried his hardest to fend them off, but he wasn't enough for him. From behind the safety of a piece of concrete, I threw a grenade and blew myself up. There were 3 tunnelers, but the small upside was that between the concrete and Eddie's body, they had a hard time getting to me. I tried a few different weapons on them, including a flare gun that blew off my entire right side. I eventually settled on a frag grenade and an assault carbine, defeated the tunnelers, and ventured deeper into the destruction. Eddie woke up, I switched to hollow points, heard more tunnelers, Eddie got frightened, and more tunnelers revealed themselves. Hollow points are good, but they're useless when fighting half a dozen tunnelers. Then, a new idea. I pulled out the flashbangs, flashed them all, and ran for my life until I was back outside. Ulysses seemed surprised that I'd gotten through the tunnels. Then he told me that what's up ahead is worse. Deathclaws. He also told me that the tunnelers would eventually invade the Mojave, and everyone would be powerless to stop them. He really is a ray of sunshine. There were a few marked men at the entrance to the high road, and a beast of some sort, but they weren't too troublesome to deal with. Back in the light, I found a shoulder-mounted machine gun, detonated another warhead, killed a marked man with a sniper rifle, took to the skies, sort of, and found a bunch of supplies at the crow's nest. I tried to send this NCR riot controller guy down to the dust below as a treat for the tunnelers, but his corpse had more fight in it than I thought it would. It took some finagling, but I got him down, stepped on a mine, went back down to the road, and saw a Deathclaw. The first shot I landed did a good amount of damage, the rest did less. I thought for sure the shoulder-mounted machine gun would tear it apart. It really didn't go as well as I hoped it would, but the big dumb idiot activated my trap card. His head turned into jelly. I dropped its egg down into the nightmare below, then jumped down after it. Farther down the road, I took out another warhead and found another Deathclaw. I'd found a few satchel charges that do 226 damage per charge. In another blinding display of ignorance, I thought they'd send the Deathclaw into orbit. They barely tickled him. I knew what the problem was though. The mines were spread out. I needed to aim for a specific body part, so I stacked the charges one on top of another, crippled the beast, killed it, taunted it. I took out a third Deathclaw from a distance with a sniper rifle. Eddie interrupted my lonesome wandering again. I blew up another warhead and arrived in Ashton. The high road is behind me, but what lies ahead is a shitstorm of my own making. The marked men at the end of the high road aren't too bad. Bonesaw could have been, but he can't climb on cars as good as I can. I then found the Ashton Silo Control Station. I pressed the pretty button and launched a fully grown nuclear warhead into the air and filled the sky with pretty dark dust. This is where you stand on a platform for a while and fend off tunnelers. This, more so than anything else, is what I was dreading. An incredibly confined space with tough enemies that effectively swarm me at all times. Yeah, it wasn't that bad. I'd found a stealth boy earlier and used it just before the tunnelers began arriving. The lift is dangerous, explosions are happening, people named Paul are screaming, it's a mess. I took advantage of my sneak and gun skills by taking out a few of the tunnelers with a silenced .22 pistol. Then things exploded, a few more died, I took out the last tunneler with a sword, and entered the Ashton missile silo. There are more tunnelers inside, but I stayed low to the ground and used sneak attacks to my advantage, so they weren't as bad as they could have been. There were more up ahead in the Sunstone Tower. More sneak attacks were used to make quick work of them. Then I finally arrived in the Divide. Apparently I made the Divide some time ago. I don't think I could have done that. My Discord name isn't Perfect Paul just because someone asked me to change my name to that. It's because I don't make fictional mistakes. A bunch of marked men were waiting below me, most of which I took out with red glare after I fell off a building and died twice. I blew up a warhead and suffered a lethal aneurysm from the aftershock, or so I thought. Turns out there was a marked man behind me. Eddie handled him for me. A bit deeper into the Divide, I picked up a missile launcher off a dead body and began making my way through the Cave of Abaddon. It was here I really began putting red glare to work, taking out anywhere from 1 to 2 tunnelers with multiple rockets. I got momentarily overwhelmed and spent more lives than I should have trying to take them out with a missile launcher, instead of just flashing them all and ignoring them. When that failed, I tried the shoulder-mounted machine gun, and when that also failed, I went back to the tried-and-true grenade rifle and finally finished them off with red glare. I emerged from the cave in the buried buildings, passed through them, and was in the Divide proper. Ulysses stole my traveling companion and told me that he'd basically condemn Eddie to an eternity of torture, which was far darker than anything else he'd said so far. Then Eddie zapped me and fled the scene before the police could arrive. I leveled up, got speech to 100, picked Here and Now as my perk, leveled up again, and put the points into guns and energy weapons for some reason. There were 2 more Deathclaws here that were a real pain to get past. I used a nail gun on one of them, which was less effective than I could have possibly imagined. Satchel charged the shit out of one of them and spent like 1,000 years trying to snipe the last one. I eventually got it and arrived in hell. There are marked men here that fire fast, firing guns that fire fast. A missile launcher handled them easily enough though. The real problem came in Waterfall Canyon, when some rapscallion pinpointed my position and kept killing me. I sought refuge near the waste disposal station. In a horrific turn of events, there are marked men here that use stealth boys, and I quick-saved when they were about 7 centimeters behind me. And to make matters worse, one of them was named Blade, which means he's a tough motherfucker. No weapon I had even came close to killing him in one shot. At one point, I'd managed to get past him, but another marked man stopped me in my tracks. It was beginning to look like this was the end of the line, until I escaped into what remained of the waste disposal station. It took multiple attempts for me to get inside and position myself somewhere where Blade couldn't attack me. I had some time to compose myself, but the problem was not solved. The only viable way to kill Blade was a missile launcher, but I either got before I could fire it or the explosion from the rocket killed me. I stood there for a while, thinking about what to do. Then I got shot from behind. That's right, someone is still in the cave with me, and they're invisible. I eventually figured out that it was Blade, and that he was behind the stone pillar. Then came another quick-save disaster. I saved about a second before Blade started firing on me, and I was crouched, and running outside was immediate death because the marked men were still there. It was a nightmare of a situation to find myself in. I got incredibly lucky and lodged myself in a corner where, in this 1-in-a-million scenario, he couldn't hit me. I pulled out Red Glare, fired at the nothing, and Blade was finally defeated. I was alone in the cave and could think about how to get out of this clusterfuck. My first trick was to go out there for a second and get their attention, then retreat inside and hope they came after me so I could fire rockets at them. Didn't work. Then I tried waiting a day, thinking they'd fuck off to some other place. They didn't, but in a dumb stroke of luck, I managed to walk out there, retreat to the left, fire a missile, kill them both, and not die. It's finally over. I can continue onward. There were a few marked men littered throughout this area. The hardest part was actually finding them, because there were multiple levels in this building. It also took me a minute to figure out where I was supposed to go. Once I got back on track, I assassinated a mark with a rocket launcher, decided to ignore the last one because I couldn't figure out where he was, disarmed a few explosives, got a 3-for-1 special on marked men corpses, and arrived at Ulysses' temple. I proved how much I've been changed by the Divide by sneak attacking a sentry bot just like I did when I first arrived. I stood outside the elevator to the temple for a while, thinking about what I'd find inside. I spent a long time trying to use my maxed out speech skill to take the diplomatic approach to dealing with Ulysses. I even looked up a guide for what specific choices I was supposed to make, but there was one fatal flaw. You're supposed to be level 25 when you begin the DLC, and by that point, you've usually had a few run-ins with the NCR or Legion, and have dealt with one of them enough to have affected your reputation, which gives you unique dialogue options. Whether you side with the NCR or Legion, you can convince Ulysses to side with you, but when you're a lonesome wanderer, that is not an option. I have to fight Ulysses, which was not what I wanted to do. Had I known I'd have to go down this road, I wouldn't have bothered with the speech skill. But there's a workaround, because if nothing else, I'm a pussy. I'm not gonna fight him like a man. I'd laid down 8 satchel charges and some C4, backed up to a safe distance, searched a few containers for anything useful, found 2 more satchel charges, backed up for the last time, pulled out my sniper rifle, took some psycho, and I managed to disappoint myself by killing the original Courier 6 with 2 shots. Then some marked men arrived and killed me with my own makeshift nuclear warhead. The second time, Ulysses took more shots. The marked men slowly made their way inside. I killed an eyebot that could have been Eddie for all I know, picked up an anti-material rifle from Ulysses' body, and spent a few minutes dealing with the marked men who began making their way inside. Between the psycho and the high-powered rifle, most went down in a single shot. I encountered a brief trouble spot thanks to someone who liked to throw explosives, retreated to a lower level, used a stealth boy to hide, took out the last marked man, completed the courier quest, leveled up to level 30, decided to send the nukes to both the Legion and NCR because fuck them both, and as the explosions erupted around me, I fled from Ulysses' temple and beat Fallout New Vegas' Lonesome Road DLC without taking any damage.